Let's talk about it. Don't let it sit on your mind. When you talk about it, know that it will be alright. Let's talk about it.
Hello, everyone. You are tuned in to Season 2 of the Mindful Podcast. Today on Episode 1 of Season 2, can we, get some excitement for that? Because that's kind of a big deal.
No, it's totally a big deal.
It's totally a big deal. We're back. We took a break, and I feel like we've gained some experiences, and we're going to have a really great episode today. So today we're going to be talking about substance use, and before we get into it, we're going to start how we always start, and I'm going to ask everyone how they're feeling. How are you feeling? Let's start off with Kris.
Low-key KB. All right, I'm feeling very well. I'm feeling well, and I'm well because I feel like things are going well for everybody in my life, not just me. And I think that's always important for me, is to just make sure that everybody in my life is taken care of and kind of in a good place. So, I'm well.
Nice.
Thank you.
Sounds like you're great.
Yeah.
I don't know. That might be the next level. I'm trying to get to great, but...
Or maybe good.
Good?
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You're
Still
on the way there.
You're on the way there.
Yeah.
It's for sure, it's a process. As you like to say, it's all connected. So.
Yes.
Universal connections are amazing. I'm feeling excited because, this is lit.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is dope.
Congratulations to us, because I feel like we're all doing this together, and I feel like everyone, both of you, and everyone else that's in the studio audience has helped support me in getting here, and just what's on your mind in getting here in general. So I think
That's real.
congratulations to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I am feeling a little heavy. Those last 2 weeks have been super heavy. So I feel emotionally heavy. But I'm still doing great. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you for being so honest.
Yeah.
Oh, we gonna be all the way honest.
Yes, definitely.
All the way honest.
We're always
Transparency
honest.
is key.
Gotta be.
Cool. So, like I said, today we're talking about substance use. And usually I start every podcast with going over some statistics. And what I really wanted to focus on for this episode was the fact that drug use of every single kind, marijuana, alcohol, whatever, has been increasing annually every single year, which I think is an important thing to talk about or note, because it's a problem that's here. It's not going anywhere. It's actually getting worse. So I think this is definitely a topic that will really be important for multiple generations to really hear about. Young people, middle-aged people, older people. So I'm excited to get into it and really talk about our experiences, whether it be with work or personal. Mm-hmm. So let's get right into it. So Amanda, I want to start with you.
Okay.
Because you do have personal experience, and also with your family with substance use. So can you share a little bit about what you've gone through, what you struggled with, the specific drugs and what you saw around you?
Sure. Wow, where do I start? Well, I'm a child that unfortunately grew up in a household with both parents who were addicted to cocaine. Mm-hmm. When you're a child, you don't really know, what's really going on. Doors are always locked. Everything is closed. You're outside, you're playing. You're kind of oblivious. However, over time and over the years, it came out that my mother also suffered from bipolar disorder, level 2. When you mix mental illness with an opioid, such as cocaine, it actually makes your symptoms 10 times worse, because you are suffering from the same types of reactions and chemical imbalances from both, that they counteract, and it can lead to a manic attack, or it could lead to a very chaotic situation. So my mom's been clean now for 13 years, so thank God for that. I'm really, really happy that she was able to seek treatment and get treatment. The road to treatment was not easy for her whatsoever. Period, point blank. Thank you. My mother, her drug use, I think, became very, very evident for me when she went to jail for a year and a half. That was probably like the hardest time of my life because I was 16 when she went away. And I had no idea that her drug use was as bad as that it was. I won't say exactly what crime she did to lead her there, but she stayed there for about a year and a half. She came home, everything seemed pretty normal, seemed like she was doing really well, and she relapsed. She ended up having my sister at 34 years old, and when my sister was born, she was born with opiates in her system, which led to my sister being placed in foster care for a few months while my mother was able to get into a treatment that fostered mothers with children who are trying to get their children back from the system, which was a beautiful program for her. Shout out Starbirth in Warwick, Rhode Island, because that was amazing for me to go through with my mother. It was amazing to see that my sister was able to, be back with my mother after completion. And she's been on the straight and narrow since. However, I actually experienced it also with my ex-husband. Well, I'm gonna call him my husband because we're technically still legally married. So I won't call him my ex-husband yet until we get that divorce signed. But it's been a struggle. He as well was just addicted to different types of drugs, whether it be opiates or alcoholism. He went through a bout with that, but this time he relapsed really, really bad in 2000 and the years are like coming back. Sorry, just give me like 1 second. In 2017, he had an accident on the job, which is what normally happens, people hurt themselves, car accidents, whatever. He was on the job. He was a chef. He worked at this beautiful, like really upscale place in Cambridge. And he ended up getting his hand caught in a pasta maker. And it basically mangled his hand pretty bad. So they put him on opiates, Tylenol with codeine and some perks. Percocet then was from like the Perk 5s to then gradually the Perk 30s, and since then it just blew up after that. I honestly, you would think that, and I just want to say this to everybody out there, if somebody is suffering and you don't know about it, it is okay. I grew up with this for years with both of my parents. I speak more on my mom's side because when my parents split up, I ended up going with my mom, so that was a lot of my experience, and I was really closer to my mom than my father. But with my husband, it just graduated from there, and I didn't recognize the signs, I wasn't looking for that because I just didn't see it. And eventually he was just telling me stories about how he was always going to these doctor's appointments, and I'm like, are you getting like rehab on your hand? Like, what's going on? And I started to realize like he's jumping doctors, but I still didn't put it in perspective what exactly that meant. For those of you at home that don't know, people will try to find new doctors all the time to write them new scripts so that they can get more of the substance.
Were there any behavior changes?
Not really, to be honest. He worked so many hours, and like as a chef, it's a totally, anybody in culinary or anybody in like a nightlife or a third shift, I salute y'all. It's a way different lifestyle.
Yeah, I couldn't do it.
It's a way different lifestyle. So for me, I didn't notice anything like with sleep patterns or anything different because I'm like, well, he's just tired. He's working crazy hours. But attitude did start to change like over time, like once it graduated. So after he was unable to get hands on perks, he started turning to street drugs, which are a little bit more easier and cheaper to obtain. And it escalated to heroin. And in the last 2 weeks, I've had to put him in detox twice. So this is like an ongoing thing. I really pray that he gets help. I'm not gonna say his name.
Is he the father of your children?
But he is the father of one of my children, yes, my youngest son,
Okay.
who is also somewhat oblivious to all of this. He understands that there's a change in dad and he can see that, but he doesn't understand exactly what that is.
How do you explain that to him?
I'm
Do you
still
explain
trying to figure that out.
it? Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like had somebody sat down and told me what this was, I don't know if I would still understand it. Addiction seems very selfish. It is very selfish, but it's also a disease. People cannot control the want or the need. This is like a chemical thing. They yearn for it. So for me to understand that now as an adult, it's different. You know, me and my mother just had a conversation the other day, and I had to explain to her, because she said, you have so much tolerance and patience for your husband, but you never had that for me or your father. And I said, well, the dynamics are different. This is parent to child. I blamed you for all of the stuff that was going on in my life because you weren't doing the right thing as a parent. Whereas now, through the education and watching you go through what you went through, and now knowing everything that I know, I would be ignorant to turn my back.
You raise a lot of great points.
Yeah.
I feel like with addiction and just mental health issues in general, it's always really hard because we always try to, or at least when I'm describing mental health issues, I always try to describe it like any other disease. So if you have high blood pressure, you have high cholesterol, you have cancer, a lot of it is what you can't control because it is a chemical imbalance for a lot of these disorders. But the thing with addiction specifically is all of the actions that go along with it. Like if someone has cancer, they're immobile, they have sickness, they do things that don't necessarily interfere with another person's like day-to-day life. But if your mom's not picking you up from school, or there's not dinner on the table, or your husband is out all hours of the night, then that has a different effect on you. But
sure.
I think we have to start shifting how we think about that and like not take it as personally.
It's so hard.
Right, it's so hard.
Not to take it personal.
Right.
I'm still struggling with that.
Right.
Like, it is very hard to stay in a place of empathy
Yeah.
and a place of understanding when you're like, okay, we'll just get rid of this thing. Because like us as humans are like, okay, if something's bad, we're gonna get rid of it.
Right.
But it's not that easy. And how do you still maintain being there for someone that you feel that you potentially could be enabling? You know, and it's a huge challenge between, you know, being there and not leaving them to enabling them. And
Right.
I think my first experience with my husband was exactly that, because I didn't find out he had a problem until he overdosed one night in the bed with me.
Oh wow.
Had I not woken up at 2:30 in the morning, I wouldn't have woken up to him intact. That was that. So when I called the ambulance, I'll never forget, because I lived in Woburn at the time, and it's a very predominantly white area. And I remember when they came into the house, they were just like, "What did your husband take?" And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "He had a couple beers, had some dinner. He's fine. Like, I don't know. He's just not."
idea.
And they kept asking me and asking me and asking me until finally I started feeling offended. Like, what do you think? Because we're people of color, like, and he's here in this house, and you're gonna ask me that there's a problem, like what you think is a problem. You know what I mean?
Right.
I got very defensive until they started opening up the kit. And once I saw them with the Narcan, I had already knew. And I think that's when it switched for me. I still wasn't even able to process what was happening in the moment, because I'm like, wait, really? You know, and that was literally my reaction through the whole thing. And I remember I got a call from the hospital a couple hours later, and he was screaming in the background, "Where's my wife? Where's my wife?" And I get on the phone and he said, "I am so sorry. You saved my life. You're probably gonna leave me now." So it was like very instant that he knew it's out now. At that point in time, I just couldn't envision myself leaving because, my mom had these issues. Like, I don't want to, this is also triggering.
And you probably wish there was someone there for your mom in the same way
To
that you
help.
could be there.
Exactly. But all of the people that were around her, and this is another thing, like, we're all people who did the same thing. So who's going to help who? When you're all sick together? No one's going to get healthy. So it takes somebody who is in a healthy mind state to be able to try to get somebody to that healthy mind state. So I tried, but after, the stolen debit cards and the credit card advances and the laying around and, my children are in this home. I have a 15-year-old with someone else and an 11-year-old child with this person. Now I'm at the point now where I'm like, I have to protect them from what I've seen.
So I think that's actually a great segue into talking about Kris's role. So you had mentioned, like, how do you get someone to a healthy state? And Kris works with mothers who do have substance use issues. So what do you see at the health center in general and in some of your programming?
So I think the one thing that I will say about the opioid epidemic is that it really does kind of affect everybody. And I know that sounds super cliche, and it's one thing that I kind of battle with every day. Because I, think about what was going on with the Nixon era and with the Reagan era, which I think everybody here kind of knows about. But I do think...
For those that don't, because there might be some people, it's not assumed, do you want to, describe it a little bit?
Just the way that, society now and drug policy is shaped now is very different than it was in the 60s and the 80s, 70s. We have, I know you guys talked about it last season with mass incarceration, but it's a big reason why, there are a lot of people of color that are in prison right now still because of drug use. And instead of treating it like, a disease that it is, we were treating it as a crime. And we don't do that the same way with opioids. And so I will say, getting back to that, I will say that I'm not big on that, but I do see opioids affecting everybody, regardless of, the color of your skin. So we see it from all packs and all walks of life. People that are doing well, people are functional, able to to do this kind of thing, go to work. You don't, again, to kind of touch on that, you're not noticing the differences. And I think that's really hard because like you said, like you'll start to feel bad about yourself when you realize that, hey, there's something going on with this person. How am I not catching that? You can be in a house, live your entire life with somebody and not necessarily realize that there's something going on. And that's obviously no fault of your own.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing. That's deep. But so I think we see it from everybody. And so I definitely, if I had the answer, I'd be rich and I wouldn't be here. I'll tell you that. But I do think that one of the biggest things is kind of breaking the stigmas down, because I think we need to be able to talk about these things. Just educating people on the fact that it's not, we don't need to treat these people like criminals. We need to treat them as people. And also, I hate the whole one-size-fits-all thing. I've worked in prevention. I've worked for politicians who see things as, the abstinence model is the end-all, be-all for everything. And that doesn't work for everybody.
Say no to drugs.
Right, that whole say no to drugs, the war on drugs thing. Yeah. And, I know before I was talking to you about Nixon's aide, John Eller, I forgot what his last name is, but who came out and essentially said, the only reason we had the war on drugs is because we could stop hippies and the people who were saying no to the war.
Yep.
And we could, stop black people.
Yep.
And so again, that gets back to the whole, the people that are in power are kind of, informing the way that we're
facilitating.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Facilitating these laws and these regulations on how we're treating people. So, and specifically people of color and marginalized groups. There's so many layers to it.
It's crazy that they use everything as an attack on us. Like being human, is just an attack on us.
Yeah.
Like wanting natural desires is because you had mentioned just the policies behind wanting hippies and black people, whatever. I saw a documentary on Netflix. It's called The Grass is Greener. I don't know if you guys have seen
I heard
it.
of that.
Yeah, no, it's so good. For anyone who hasn't seen it, you should watch it. And it really started from white women going to jazz clubs and dancing with black men, and white men being fearful that they were going to create mixed babies and fornicate with white women. So they were like, okay, we have to put some sort of policies, we have to criminalize these people in some sort of way because we don't want them fraternizing with our women. That's the story behind marijuana and why we get arrested for marijuana.
Yeah, even just the name, like the marijuana name is cannabis, you know what
I
mean?
Right. They gave it something Mexican sounding so that people could be like, ooh, the Mexicans.
What's this? Exactly.
Yeah.
Even in Boston, like, you know, what they call methadone mile. You know, I used to see memes all the time and would get so upset at people, like when The Walking Dead was really huge and they would have like zombies at the window and somebody would be like, oh, this is exactly what driving down Melania Casa is like. And I'm just like, when did we dehumanize people?
Right.
This is somebody's mom. This is somebody's uncle, auntie, sister, mother. You know what I'm saying? Like, when did that become a thing to make fun of? Even the other day, I want to say I was driving down, I was coming off the highway, and I saw this man on the sidewalk, and he looked like he was looking for something, and he was there for a little while. Like, you know, Mass Ave traffic is crazy, but I was there for a really long time, and he was just like digging through the grass, and then this cop like came up and just like beeped his like siren, like his lights. It was like whoop, whoop, and then he like jumped and like ran, and I'm just like, that's crazy. Instead of asking him like, are you okay? Did you lose something?
Right.
Like, instead you're like pushing, just go about your business.
Right.
And it's like, it's trash to see like that happen. I wanted to say something and I'm like, I'm not gonna say nothing because this is a cop. Like, but once again, like, I'm dehumanizing myself by not even having a voice to even say something to this other person about how they're treating this person.
Yeah, I think that raises a huge point about going back to stigma and just being as intentional as you possibly can about even just the language that we use. You know what I mean? Like, I know it's big where, you know, especially when we were coming up, you know, it's like, oh, that dude's a crackhead, that dude's tweaking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just really, again, goes back to the point you were making about dehumanizing these people. Like,
Or you're a bum because you're an addict. It's like, no one wakes up and says, I want to be an addict today.
Right.
I'm gonna affect everybody and myself and my health and my family, and I'm gonna drag them through this because this is how I want to wake. Nobody wakes up. And I think when you say like destigmatizing it, it's a good point because I've gotten into a car accident a couple times, not my fault, but a couple times, and they've always prescribed me like really hard drugs every single time, and I'm like, me personally, not only because of my experience in my childhood, but also in my experience in my adulthood, but I've just never been one, like, cocaine was always something that I stayed away from. Like, kids when I was in school were rolling marijuana up with cocaine and like, here, smoke, and I'm like, no, because I was scared. I always thought in my head, like, if I do it one time, that's all it's gonna take. So, all that to say, you know, when I forgot even where I was going with that story, but even just seeing like the usage and like how people are just like, that's what it was, how people are prescribed these drugs, like it's so easy to get and like obtain, and what people don't realize is like, we don't know what's gonna affect us or what we're gonna be considered like addictive to our bodies. Some people can be on, you know, opiates and have an accident, go through treatment and be fine, you know what I mean? And no harm, no foul, but other people, like, it does affect you. And when that happens, whose responsibility is it to, like, those doctors, like, I thought about it in my head, I'm like, if they started seeing a pattern, like, at some point in the system, like, are you seeing that this person is, like, jumping from clinic to clinic to clinic in the same city? Does that, like, warrant suspicion? Or, like, and then what do you do? What's the reaction to that? Like, do you get them into some kind of treatment? Do you question them? What is the line? Like, how do we sustain, like, how do how do we prevent it getting
Right.
worse?
Yeah, how do you remedy that situation? And I mean, and I hate to, it sounds like such a conspiracy theory, but it literally all comes back down to where the money, you know what I mean? And it's like these drug reps are pushing, you know, exactly, the pharmaceutical companies are pushing these drugs. You know, doctors are being taken out to these elaborate dinners, taken out on these, you know, expensive, you know, very wild, you know, trips. And I think, you know, that's okay. Like if I prescribe this amount of X, Y, or Z, I'm gonna be able to go on this trip, or I'll be able to take my family on this trip. And so, you know, there does need to be more accountability, and there is now, but it's after the fact. You know,
Exactly.
It's now we have all of these, you know, instances where people are dying, people are losing their mothers, people are losing their fathers, their brothers, sisters, whatever. And it's like, okay, now we're gonna do something about it, but it's too late now.
They don't talk about how there's like a fight for beds and the urgency for that. Like, you know what I mean? We talk about that with homelessness and say, oh, we know this, but what about the other side of it? There's sometimes what they call, there's levels of detox, right? So there's like emergency treatment where they bring you in, you make a phone call, they bring you in, you stay there for 7 days. But the person is also like on their own, like it's at their will. So after the 7 days, if you're not sitting down with a counselor, or a counselor is not approaching you and saying, okay, where are we at now? And we're thinking about moving you here because we think you need further treatment. They're giving them the option whether or not to walk out the door. And because of what I just went through 2 weeks ago, that's exactly what happened. And that's why I'm mad. And that's why I'm angry. No longer at him, but at the facilities that are doing this to these people. We put him in for 6 days. 6 days after almost overdosing 4 times in 5 months. You're privy to this information.
Right.
So you keep him from 6 days and then say, okay, here's the door, you can walk through it if you feel like it. Where was the contingency plan? And then what happens, he comes home and he gets high again, and now we're sending him back to the same facility again.
Or even, there's usually a higher rate of overdose after they leave the facility, or if they're incarcerated after they leave jail.
Because once you're sober, and
you don't know how much.
You don't. And fentanyl, we're not talking about fentanyl. Like, it is killing people at such a high rate. They call it a hot shot. That's what they're calling it when you pass away after being so clean for so long. They say this person got a hot shot and now they're dead. The fact that we even have like terminology around that is crazy. And the fact that people are injecting themselves with fentanyl, like that's enough to put down a horse. Our bodies are nowhere near that body weight. So could you imagine? It's ridiculous to me. And I put a lot of responsibility and accountability on the facilities because you are trained in this. You see this. These people also, not for nothing, but my husband tried. I know he tried. For 2 years, he tried. But pressures of regular lifestyle and bills and rent and gentrification and, you know, being laid off, he's a union worker. You know, fear of being laid off if he doesn't overperform every time that they're about to do a cut. Those pressures are real. And when you are trying to struggle through that and you're only going to meetings, not to dismiss meetings whatsoever, but meetings are not the only thing you should be attending. We should be talking about internal spiritual counseling, deep intensive therapy work. There is a reason why my husband is still addicted. There's a reason. It is attached to something. But we're not going to know what that is if we're in a group setting talking about every week what our struggles are in regular life with a group of people. If I lose my mom at 16 and I'm still struggling from that tragedy, that could make me want to be in an oblivious state where I'm not thinking about that. And because he's a person of color, we're in an area that doesn't represent him. So now he's also attending meetings with people that don't represent who he is. So how are you supposed to feel comfortable in that? How are you supposed to get to the root? Counseling and meetings is great. I'm not dismissing that. I think weekly check-ins are, I need weekly check-ins, you know what I mean? But I also think we're missing like that psychiatry behind it. Like, what is the root? Let's talk this out.
Kris, you must have seen some sort of success stories,
Yeah.
I'm hoping,
no,
at the health center. What has worked for some of
absolutely.
our patients?
I think I think a big part of recovery. Again, I come from the harm reduction methodology. That's what I sincerely believe in, and I think that's more of a holistic approach than anything else.
Yeah.
And I think, to get back to what you're saying, like the therapeutic aspect is huge because I do think a lot of these issues, like you said, like nobody wakes up and says, hey, I want to do this and, mess up my entire life. Like nobody says that. But, you get to the roots of these issues and then from there you can actually begin like your process of recovery. And I don't think that, people are going to be different, there's going to be a case to case, whatever. But I do think that a big part for a lot of the success stories that I've seen have come from some kind of therapeutic, whether it is, the traditional therapy or there's some kind of therapeutic action involved in it. And so I'm a huge fan of that. I know places mandate it. I'm not big on, mandating therapy because for me, I think you have to be ready to make that change.
Right.
It has to come from within.
Agreed.
And so you can't force something on somebody. It's just, psychologically, you're not going to do it. So I think that's huge. And I know a lot of programs that do mandate that, where they're mandating a lot of things like Section 35. I'm not going to get into that, but essentially that's, forcing somebody to go get treatment and the hold is not for long enough for there to even be a change.
It's 4 days, right?
Right, yeah. And it just, to me, it doesn't work. But I do think that there needs to be a change from within. But I think as long as you have people that are kind of there for you, like a support system, then I do think that's when change will actually occur. And that's when I've seen the most successes working in this field, at least. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is a lot.
It
is a lot.
It's very layered. It's very difficult. It's very complex. But I think, again, to go back to the harm reduction model, I think the reason it works as well as it does, it's not perfect by any means, but it's better than the abstinence model where you're saying, like this, just don't do it. Just say no to drugs kind of thing.
You said you work with single mothers. Do you see any of these children?
So, I mean, you see, I'll see the kids running around and everything. I don't necessarily deal with the kids like one-on-one, so I'm not, checking in on them. But I can see how, again, like having somebody who is actually dealing with the mental health part of it is going to be helpful because that's going to be able to, you'll be able to sit down with the child and actually unpack what's going on. So they will understand that it's not their fault that this stuff is going on. And then later on when they are able to process everything, like, hey, this went on or whatever, it wasn't your fault, it wasn't mommy's fault, it wasn't daddy's fault. Like it went on because, there was just something going on. Like you have a little boo-boo on your brain. So what are you going to do to fix it? You put a Band-Aid on it. That Band-Aid is therapy, and I think that's the best way that I've heard any therapist kind of explain it to a child. And I think that's been super helpful. So that's...
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
So we're all in agreement that people use because of some sort of underlying issues. So prior to your husband getting his accident with his hand, there were things that were going on. And then once he got prescribed some of these medications, that's when he found some sort of, I guess, alleviation from his past and then began to use. Okay.
I'm a very spiritual person too, and being in the house is really, really challenging because I feel it heavy. Like I feel a heavy presence in there. And like, this might be too deep for some people, but I'm gonna say it anyways because it's on my spirit. But like, I also feel like it's a battle. It's a spiritual warfare. There are demons, literally, that he has not faced or he has not conquered that are following him. And when he does this drug, I feel like, in a sense, it brings him closer to that darkness because he's not going towards the other way, which would be therapy and would be treatment and would be getting and facing those demons.
And why hasn't he accessed any of that, do you think?
He doesn't want to.
Okay. So back to the point of you having to be ready.
And that's the control issue we have as human beings, right? Because I've done everything to try to control the issue. I'm going to do this. Well, I'm going to take this and I'm going to think. And that's another thing, like you start to think like an addict. I'm not gonna put my laptop over here. I'm gonna like actually hide it over here just in case like somebody comes in who's sketchy or he decides that he doesn't have enough. That will drive you to a whole different place. And I had to relinquish control. There's nothing I can do. I can plead, I can cry, I can beg, I can get mad. I could physically put my hands on him, which I don't suggest anybody doing. Violence is never the answer, which I have not done. But I have thought about it, but I have not done it. But there's nothing you can do. Like, this is this person's life. You make the choice. Somebody else can't do that for you. And I'm at the point now where, you know, I had to have a real conversation with him, and I said to him, I said, if you don't go to treatment, I can call the cops. And you could detox there. But after this, you're making the decision not to go. So after this, I have to let go. Because if not, then I'm sick. I'll be sick. I have been sick. For the last 3 years, I've been super sick.
And you have to take care of yourself.
And my babies.
Exactly.
Because if I'm not right, then they're not right. And if I'm off, they're gonna feel it, right? So it's like I have to protect my own well-being at the same time still being concerned and worried about this person. It was every day I was getting out of bed, rushing to my phone just to make sure, like, when's the last time he was on social media? Did he call me? Did somebody call me? Is there a missed call? Like, every single day on edge. Like, that's no way to live.
Yeah, the
Completely.
constant stress and anxiety.
Or even just putting your mind to a place where you may have to bury somebody. Nobody talks about that part either. You know, like, family and I talk about this, my side of the family, because once again, I'm talking about this now because I'm now a part of it. Like, I feel like it is part of my testimony to talk about it. Before I was very, very, I would say secretive, because I think I was embarrassed. I think I was ashamed. I think I felt really, really guilty for not catching it. I think I was holding on to guilt just in case he did pass away. Like, I don't have the funding to bury him, you know, and then looking up what that would take and what that would cost, like, it'll put you somewhere else. What your kids are gonna wear, like, it'll put you somewhere else. And, it's just not a good way of like living. So I had to give him like the ultimatum, like, it's either you go or you don't. And when I get the call, I have to make the arrangements that I have to make if and when. But I can't do this anymore. But it is very hard for people to watch someone deteriorate, because that's essentially what it is. When he came out of detox, it was like the first thing he did. You know, and I took keys away from him. I'm like, you have no access to the house, so you have no way to, you have no place to come when you get out. Lo and behold, yeah, a copy of the keys was in the house when I got there, and I'm like, what are you doing here? They let me go, and I'm just like, what? And now you're trapped in your room using again. So now what? It is literally one day at a time. This is something that people really have to like get up and like work towards. We think it's like, oh, we don't like our job today, so we don't really feel like going. But like, this is their lifestyle every single day. Like, how do I stay clean? What do I need to do? What meetings are there that I need to go to? Where am I gonna get support and resources from? Who can I pull from? You know, like, that's an everyday thing. At least what I see from my mother's perspective. You know, she's constantly staying on track with what she needs to do, because it's every day. She's like, I would be lying to you if I told you that there's days that I do think about using again. I'm not, but I think about it. It's a constant battle. So even when you think, oh, well, they've went to treatment and they're healthy for 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or 13 years. No, this is an everyday thing.
Which is why, I mean, it's recovery. You know, it's never an ending. And even when
it's never healed. Because if that was the case, it would be called healed, not recovery, right?
You know, you look at the stages of change, and you know, people argue it all the time, but you know, relapse is in there for a reason. You know, And I love the point that you brought up about just feeling like you had to hide things, because I'm a firm believer that, you know, again, with the drug policy that we have in America, that, you know, we're essentially, you know, it's everybody wants to be secretive about it. Everybody feels like they have to hide everything about it. And essentially you're kind of promoting some kind of, you know, like addict, if you will, behaviors by doing that, you know, and I think it's sad, you know, it goes back to the whole mental health thing about how we do need to promote mental health and be more open and honest about that. And it's the same thing with recovery, you know.
Yeah, and I think we're doing that now by having this conversation. And I just want to commend you, Amanda, for being so strong and sharing that story, because we've known each other for so long, but that was a completely different side of you that I didn't know that you were dealing with, that you were struggling with. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing that story. Thank you for being strong for yourself, for your children.
It's divine timing. We talked about this for a while now, and we've had conversations, and I told you a little bit, but I'm also an artist, and I'm really in the community, and I think that's the other part of this too, why I felt like I had to hide, because on the outside perspective, people are like, you're booked and busy, and you've got all these things going on. I said I wasn't gonna cry, but I'm like, and it feels like kind of like imposter syndrome in a sense. Cause like you're out here and you're like, hey, I'm promoting positivity, and like I want to support everybody, and I want to be here, and I want to do the show, and I want to perform. But meanwhile, you've got all this other stuff going on and nobody knows about it. And it's like, it feels like you're being fake. You know?
Do you think that's a coping mechanism for you, being busy all the time?
Hell yeah. If anybody ever, like, people always ask me, like, how do you do what you do? No, that's how I cope. I don't stop, because if you stop, you process. If you process,
you get sad.
You get sad, and then it really keeps you stagnant. So I've learned since a child, and we don't talk about this either, to process very fast. I've had to take care of my mother as a child, so I don't know what it was like to really have a parent, because I was more of an adult at 16 than what my mom was at her age raising me. So like, I just feel like me saying this out loud, because we don't talk about it, and people may get this perspective that like my life is so great and like I'm booked and busy, and it's not. Like, it sucks. It hurts. It's trash. We want to put it into our art, but like also there's like this slippery slope of like, is this my story? Like, do I have a right to say this? Is this too much? Am I putting this person on blast? You know, I'm lucky that me and my husband obviously are on good terms, as good as we possibly can, right? He knows that I love him. He knows, I know that he loves me. We share a beautiful child together. There's nothing in the world that I would not try to do for him. But he knows I write about it. You know, he knows.
How does that make him feel?
At first, like, you know, defensive. Plus he had cancer, and cancers be all in their feelings. I'm just saying, like, I'm just saying. But, you know, he was really, really defensive at first, and was just like, why you gotta tell my business, and like, why you gotta put it out there? And I'm like, it's not for that. Like, I'm not trying to glorify or utilize. This is my experience. I feel like I'm respecting you by changing pronouns and changing scenarios to kind of make it seem like it's not about you, even though this is, you're listening to it, so you know what details hit. These people don't know that. Now I'm at the point where I'm like, I should be talking about this, because I'm living it, like, on both ends. It's
and that's
really,
what we do as artists. We reflect the truth. We reflect our times.
And that's it. And as a child, generational trauma exists. So now here I'm at this stage now where I'm like, okay, how do I break this cycle so that my baby won't do it? You know what I'm saying? Me and my brother grew up in this type of environment, but me and my brother haven't done anything harder than like marijuana. Like, I've dabbled a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. I've dabbled a little bit in certain things when I was younger, but my brother never did. Like, ever did. And I think like it's just like when they say like abusive homes, right? Like you can have two kids and one can grow up to be the abuser, one cannot, you know what I mean? Because of what they see.
Exactly.
But also like we don't talk about it genetically. Like addiction is a thing.
Yep.
Like addictive behaviors are a thing. Maybe yours is not with opiates and it could be shopping. Or you know what I mean?
Right.
Online shopping. I know a lot of people are online shopping. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to say gambling so much. That's like the weird point for me as far as like labeling it as addiction, because I do believe like people can actually go and enjoy and play and do it and not get addicted to it. But it's weird because I'm doing a series. I actually was going to keep this super quiet, but we're here now and I'm telling my whole life, so we might as well keep doing it. But I'm doing a series right now and it's through photography. And it's going to be laying out different addictive disorders.
That's dope.
So we started with cigarettes. Because I feel like cigarettes and coffee are like the two things that people like. It's socially so acceptable. It's super normalized. I feel like even alcohol is too, to a certain extent.
Oh, definitely.
You know
Especially
what I mean?
during time periods. We're going to be talking about college for the episode after this, and I feel like that time period for sure, like that is a part of the culture.
And like people are just like okay with it, but then it's like it moves or graduates to like opiates or even marijuana, where like it's a gateway drug. Where's the drug?
What is that line?
So I'm working on something like that's going to be pretty deep. It's going to be really, really heavy. I'm definitely going to have to put trigger warnings and advisories on it, because I know for me, like art is healing. That is my process. To be able to, I used to smoke cigarettes. I don't anymore. I've actually haven't smoked a cigarette in almost a year. So I'm really proud of myself. Thanks. But I collected these cigarette packs and I was like, what am I gonna do with them? And for me, it's like reflective. If I see the picture of something that I'm doing, it's almost like I heal through it. I did a couple of domestic violence awareness photo shoots almost 2 years ago. And I had someone do my face, and I remember looking at those pictures and being on the shoot, all three of us were crying. Shout out to Ashley Echo and David for being the photographer for that. It was absolutely beautiful because it was healing. Like it felt so real and in the moment, you know? And then looking back on those pictures now, I'm like, wow, that was then, you know? Like I'm not there anymore. So for me, like seeing this addiction series kind of roll out and create awareness, you know? People are always talking about, oh, you're booked and busy and you're a brand and an influencer and all these followers and whatever, but I feel like if that's what you see and that's your perception, your perspective, then like, why don't I utilize that to like highlight stuff that's really deep for me? Even my poetry, you know, like I don't talk about anything that's not personal. These are my real life experiences. So I feel like doing that will create more of an awareness. Even with coffee beans, like there'll be a photo shoot with me popping coffee beans in my mouth like candy. It's a metaphor, because that's what we do every day. People are in line. The line will be out the whole door, and people are sitting here and making sure they get their coffee. But nobody talks about the fact that it's addictive.
Right. When can we expect that?
I don't have a release date.
Okay.
I just shot like the first photo in the series, but I'm taking my time with it.
Okay.
Because shout out to Anson Raps. He's the one who did the photography for the first shoot for the series. I really was telling him about it like a year ago, and we finally got together and was able to do it. But to do it in the house that my ex-husband just left, and to do it with cigarettes that I have now moved past, it was beautiful for me. Like it's seeing that and healing through that where I'm like, wow, this means so much.
What brought you to the place where you knew what would help you heal or like help you process? Because I think that in itself is super powerful. The fact that you have been without smoking cigarettes for a year, but like, and we've talked about wanting to be in that place, but how did you know like you were in that place to stop smoking? And then how did you know that like art was the method of healing?
I think pain is where it derived from. My uncle passed away almost a year ago.
Okay.
never smoked a cigarette in his life, but had lung cancer, brain cancer. How? How? So when he passed away, and he was like an advocate, huge advocate about like not smoking cigarettes and not smoking like blunts. Don't smoke that blunt paper. And it just kept replaying in my mind. And I remember the day that I got the call, my dad was like, you know, your uncle passed away. And I went to the house, and his body was still in the house. And I was like, why didn't you tell me? Seeing that, immediately I was like, I have to stop.
Okay.
So that was my primary reason for not smoking cigarettes. I had been trying for years, but it also was a choice. I would say that I wanted to, but I don't think I really wanted to. But when he passed away, I was like, no, I have to. And since that day, I didn't look back. I've always written as a child. I've been writing in diaries. I was so corny. I'd be like, dear diary, today
I did too. You weren't the only one.
I really was like on that Judy Blume status, like, hey God, it's me, Margaret type status. I know. I grew up in Hyannis, Cape Cod, don't judge me. But anyways, I would always like write in my journals like all the time and like remix songs and like try to recreate just art and just writing. So that's always been like a part of me. I just don't think I realized it was so healing until I moved to Boston and got into this creative, beautiful community that is Boston, that is full of talented, creative, individual, amazing people. And when I started seeing people like perform and like the pain and the angst and like the feeling and the words, and I'm like, whoa, it was Matt Gannum who really like inspired me to start writing about my husband's addiction and what that looked like. Because he would get on the stage and he's speaking from an addict perspective. He told my whole life. Like every single thing I was experiencing with my husband was exactly what he was talking about doing, and how he felt bad about, you know, taking money from his mother and like things that he was like, this is the stuff that I did. And I was like, wow, I'm like, if Tim could talk out of this sickness, would that be the voice? Is that what that would sound like? And for me, that internalized like, okay, well maybe I should start writing about this stuff. And then I was inspired to perform it because I'm like, well, if he can inspire me to do this,
then you can
and
too.
Risha Green and the Ja D's and the Freeze and the D Ruffs and the Didi Delgados and the Nava the Butterflies. These were people that I was going out and seeing that were just really just honed in on their craft and were captivating and like relatable. And I was like, I want to be able to do that. I'm reading my stuff to my friends, but I want somebody to know like this, they're not alone in any of this stuff. Maybe I could just say it in a different way. And that's when it became healing, was hearing it out loud. So I would always tell people, like, if you're thinking about something, get out your head and say it out loud. Because like when you hear it out loud, it just changes the dynamic and the power of the words. Period. Period.
Period. With the T at the end. So we are, I believe, out of time, or towards the end of our time. But before we wrap up, I just want to ask you guys to give a piece of advice to someone that something that you would tell them if they're struggling with addiction, or maybe advice for family members that might be supporting someone that is addicted.
I've been talking this whole time. You got this.
To quote Nipsey Hussle, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
I like that.
I think that's the biggest thing, honestly, because people, especially nowadays, we want that instant gratification. And this definitely is not a matter or a barrier or an issue, whatever you want to label it, that is going to happen overnight. So if you're supporting somebody, you got to stay strong. Big ups to Amanda Shea for being
I think we need to clap it up for Amanda
don't
Shea.
Do that. No,
we need to clap it up for you.
For real.
Thank you.
I appreciate y'all.
And if you're going through it, you know you're always gonna have people that are behind you, whether it's somebody in your family or whether it's somebody that's in the treatment center, whether it's your social worker, your psychiatrist, the EMT that picked you up. Like, somebody's gonna care about you, and I think that's important to try and remember, hang on to that. So
Big facts. And community.
Yeah.
Shout out my community, because like I love all y'all. Wow, piece of advice. I would say for families struggling, or like if you find yourself in a position that's very relatable to mine, I would say don't blame yourself. It's not your fault.
yeah,
Somebody told me this the other day, you've done everything you can do, you're doing everything you can do. Just lead with love. But also like self-preservation is important too.
Agreed.
That's not selfish. You're entitled to that. For an addict out there who's struggling, someone loves you. Someone loves you. And if you were gone, it would matter. Period. I tell my husband all the time, like, it's not just because he has a child that he's still here, because he actually has 2 kids, but it's not just because he has children that he's here. Like, he has a purpose. And if you're lucky enough to make it through several different overdoses as he was, then that means your purpose is strong. Take heed to that. Just love each other.
Yeah. And I would echo what you guys said and also add gratitude. Just remembering that there are things to live for. There are good things in your life, even when you feel like you've hit rock bottom, there's always something to look forward to. So I would add that too. Are there any resources that you guys want to put out there? Maybe this could be a plug for some Brockton neighborhood resources.
I think there's a lot of good resources.
Yeah.
There is a Moms Who Care program at Brockton Neighborhood Health Center. Shout out to France Belazar. She's a great social worker. She's doing good things in the community. Allison Pinkover at BNHC, the program manager actually of the substance use department. She knows everything in the Brockton community, and probably Massachusetts, honestly, about substance use. So she's another one, and they just have a great team. The harm reduction clinic over there is fantastic. I think right now there's a lot of good federal dollars.
Oh yeah, a lot of money. A lot of money.
But there are resources out there, and I think people care about this subject. And I think it's just, if you need something, just call somebody. You know,
if you need something, say something.
Yeah. Just say it.
And what, like, specifically? I know I said we wrapping up, but because we focus on racial justice, like, what specifically would you say to a person of color trying to navigate resources who might be fearful of the healthcare system, because we know there is plenty of reason for us to be skeptical about it? And just thinking about our harm reduction clinic in general, you had mentioned that the opioid epidemic impacts everyone, but in our HRC, our harm reduction clinic, we're seeing 90% of the patients that are coming in are white. So obviously there's like some sort of disconnect with who's coming in seeking services. So for a person of color who might be hesitant, there might be that added stigma. What is something that you would say is specific for our people to know?
Before I answer that, I do want to shout out Mayor, MYR. Look it up. They are predominantly based in Worcester, but they do have programming in Boston that's more on the youth side. There are youth that are also struggling with addiction too, so I just want to put that out there.
Okay.
Bannon is an awesome program. They can definitely refer services. Serenity is another treatment center that you can call. That's all I know off the top of my head for right now. As for people of color, I would say if you're not initially comfortable, hotlines, seriously. They're everywhere. I actually have a magnet on the fridge right now that has like a substance abuse line and has like procedures of when somebody's overdosing, what to do, how to use Narcan, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say, talk to someone on the phone first. Rosie's Place in Boston for people of color. I mean, I know they serve predominantly women, but I've never seen them turn anybody away that's looking for services. But even if you happen to be a single mother or just, you know, a person of color, I would say go to Rosie's, especially if you have children, go to Rosie's. They have a plethora of information. And also, like, we're not also, like, even just thinking about our communities, schools. Like, where your kids go to school.
Yeah.
Like, talk to the counselor, talk to the advisor. Shout out Young Achievers in Mattapan. Their counseling system and their team over there is just absolutely phenomenal. They are able to get you to where you need to be, or at least try to find some resources for you. I know some people are scared because we think, oh, if we go to the school or we tell like an authoritative figure, DCYF, those are real things. I've been in that mind state, but I'm telling you, people are more willing to help you if you navigate and tell them, you know, what the issue is and what exactly you're looking for. And that's the other thing, know exactly what you're looking for. If you're looking for services and you call the hotline, tell them, this is my situation. You know, I may or may not be in a domestic situation, but I need services for X, Y, and Z. Because what people don't label for other people who are affected by addiction with PTSD, depression, anxiety, like those are real things. I already suffer from social anxiety, but my anxiety has definitely been kicked up a lot more since this all happened. So like we need to talk about like what we need. PTSD is a real thing in these types of scenarios. You can't just erase it.
Right.
So just know, I guess, what you're looking for. Call a hotline first, try to navigate through them, and talk to your community. That was the best thing I could have done. I had people and friends that had my back that I wasn't asking to have my back. Sometimes just like opening your mouth and saying what you need will get you the help that you need. Don't let pride or ego or, you know, embarrassment or being ashamed like deter you from just asking for help. Speak to other people of color that you trust.
Thank you, guys.
That's a lot.
Yes, no, it's a lot, but it's great
That's all I
advice.
got.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're gonna end today's episode the way we end every episode, and that is with a mindful moment. So for those of you guys that don't know, being mindful is being present and non-attached, non-judgmental. So I know a lot of times we be doing things and we're like, oh, why do we say it like that? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? But being mindful is not doing that. It's really just doing whatever is what you're supposed to be doing in that moment without any thought and just doing it. So there's a quote that I like to describe mindfulness with, and that is, if you are in the past, you are depressed. If you are in the future, you are anxious. And if you are in the present, you are at peace. So we are going to do a mindfulness exercise together, and that is going to be a laughing yoga exercise. So I did a laughing yoga training at my job, and it was so much fun. And I want to bring that here with you guys. So if everyone could stand up, my guests and people in the audience. We're going to inhale and raise our arms. And our exhale is going to be a laugh. One more time, inhale. Exhale. Now I want us to do this again, but I want you to find someone, a partner, will be a trio, and I want you to look into the person's eyes as you laugh out. So we'll just go back and forth.
All right.
Ready? Inhale. Exhale. One more time. Inhale. Yo, Kris's face. Well, that's a wrap on the first episode of season 2 of the Mindful Podcast. Thank you. Stay tuned. Oh, yes. So you see the shirt that I'm wearing? Designed by Alex Joaquin. Yes. He does all of our branding, our logo, everything. So shout out to him. But we have these More Counselors, Less Cops tees available at our website, www.woym.com. inc.org, and it's right here. So please purchase a shirt so you can support what's on your mind.
Fire.
Let's talk about it, talk about it. Don't let it sit on your mind. When you talk about it, know that it will be alright. Let's talk about it, talk about it. Let's talk about it. Don't let it sit on your mind. When you talk about it, know that it will be alright. Let's talk about it, talk about it. Let's talk about it. Don't let it sit on your mind.